Um, um, the topic of we have purpose is a bit hesitant for two reasons. First of all, the answer may be somewhat obvious. We have purpose. What's the purpose? Serve God. Okay, fine. Finished. We can all go eat lunch. The other thing is that I don't know what purpose is. I don't even know what my purpose is. Certainly, I can't tell anybody what their purpose is. There's some things that I might be able to speak about with a little bit of knowledge. This is not one of them. Um, but in any case, because we are only 2 weeks from Rosh Hashanah, um, I thought it might be an interesting discussion. Certainly not a lecture. And I wanted to start off with a story. At first, I was somewhat skeptical, but since I've heard it from two different sources and pretty much accurately one to the other, then I guess it really is a true story. I don't know where it happened or when it happened, but the story is that there was somebody, I imagine it was a young man in his 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, who sued his parents. Why? He said, "You gave birth to me without my permission. Here I am, saddled with debt, have all kinds of bills to pay. It's not my fault. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to be brought into this world. It's your responsibility. You should pay the debts. You should pay all my bills." And from what I understand from one of the sources, from one person, either the judge threw out the case altogether, or that the parents' defense was, well, we also didn't ask to be born. It's not our fault. It's our parents. And then it goes on and on and on and on back to, to Adam and Eve, essentially. This is an interesting concept. I mean, nobody asked to be conceived. Nobody asked to be born. Interestingly, without getting into the debate on abortion, I've never heard anybody ask, whether pro or against abortion, ask anybody else, are you upset that your mother didn't abort you? So here we are in the world dealing with all kinds of challenges, things that are not necessarily easy. And none of us have requested or even get permission to enter this kind of existence. And this is, like, I think, sheds a lot of light on the whole idea of having a purpose. Like I said, I don't know what the purpose is. I'm certainly not going to, in Hebrew, say latif musar. I don't know how to translate that, to give over all kinds of teachings and what's the word? Well, teachings and how to act, benefits, the proper way to act. But I started thinking, okay, what is purpose? And so I looked up definitions. I found three definitions that I think shed light on this whole topic. The first one is the reason for which something exists or is done, made, or used. Well, okay, I think that's a pretty accurate definition of purpose. The second one, an intended or desired result. I think it's a little bit less impactful, but the idea is of result. The third one I really liked. The why or intention behind an action. The why. Why? Why are we here? Who needs us? And if by extension, who cares? There's a story with the founder of Hasidut Chabad, the Mordechai Ken, that one of his Hasidim came to him, and he was actually in financial trouble. The business was collapsing. And he asked for this, he asked for that, he asked for help, he asked for advice, and so on and so forth. After presenting his case, the Rebbe said, well, you've been telling me what you need, but tell me something. What are you needed for? And he fainted. Because the first time he came face to face with not what he needs, what he should receive, but what he's needed for, what he should give. And I think this sheds a lot of light on the idea of purpose. Again, I'm not defining, I'm not directing me, myself, or anybody else to what purpose is, but there's I want to read, I don't want to say a sentence because the Rebbe Halayatz, the previous Rebbe, this sentence lasts 1.5 pages, but a few lines. And as I've mentioned, I'm not very good at translating, but I want to try to get over the gist. The Hebrew is so rich, so it flows. It has such meaning to it that I'm going to try to, in any case, like I said, it begins, the two methods or ways that in godly influence, godliness is descended and influences, represent two approaches. One is general, and the other one is the specific details or the specific way. And these two methods represent intelligence and comprehension that come about from two ways of serving God. And he says kayadua, as is well known. I like the way that the Rebbe brings in ideas that are so difficult to understand or comprehend. And he says, oh, of course, it's simple, it's well known. But this is the point, that every comprehension and in bit of intelligence, that he used the word amitita, that is truthful, but in other words, that is valid, is that which brings about a sense of doing. And I think the whole idea of doing, we say, oh, purpose. Our purpose is to serve God. So, that's kind of like saying, I'm going to make a New Year's resolution to be a better person. You don't go into details. You don't. So, purpose, serve God. But here he's bringing something in addition to that. The idea of doing is the purpose of our existence is not simply to exist, but to live. The idea of doing. In other words, what the Rebbe is saying is actions, doing in the physical world, being involved with other people. And that's why I say, what is my purpose? I really don't know. Somebody else's purpose? Certainly I don't know. But I do want to mention there's a fantastic book by Rabbi Manis Friedman, Creating a Life That Matters. Very readable, very applicable, very, it hits home. So then, instead of trying to decide what purpose is and define purpose and direct anybody, myself or anybody else, to purpose, I looked up some Hasidic sayings. What is the value of purpose? And here are some interesting things that quotes that I managed to find. When you have purpose, you have inner peace. Okay, that's a good reason for having purpose. Purpose is the antithesis of despair. Another great reason for having purpose. Where there is purpose, there is resoluteness. Where there is purpose, there is confidence. Well, the whole idea of purpose, let us accept some kind of a purpose, it gives us a tremendous amount of strength, a tremendous amount of direction. And I want to bring two quotes from the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, there is a purpose in where you are right now. Okay. Whatever each of us is doing, whenever we're doing, there's a purpose in it. The Rebbe brings a Talmudic statement as every person is obligated to say, for my sake, the world was created. On this, the Rebbe explains, the purpose of education is to direct this innate conviction towards its proper expression, that a person should appreciate that his every thought and deed is of real, even global significance. The Rebbe doesn't pull punches here. He goes straight at it. Every thought, every deed that we do that not only has consequences, but let us accept or relate to it as if it has global consequences. I want to bring two other teachings from the Rebbe Harashab. That was the Rebbe Harashab is the father of the Rebbe Harayatz, who was the previous Rebbe. The Rebbe Harashab was Rebbe from 80, I don't remember exactly, went until 1920. And he emphasizes this in another way. One soul was sent down to this world for a purpose. Okay, very good. That purpose cannot be realized through living in solitude, but rather living within this physical world. Again, the idea that we were mentioning up until now. But now he brings something in addition. The purpose of the soul's descent into the body is to refine the animalistic traits, to purify the emotions, and to subdue all that is not holy. Okay, so now we have the soul has two purposes. One is to give life to the body in order to enable the body to deal with the physical world, do good deeds, influence. That's one purpose. Another purpose is that we shouldn't be like animals. We should be like human beings. We should accept and accentuate our holy traits. In the book that I mentioned before, Rabbi Manis Friedman tells a story. He says there was a teenager who tried to commit suicide. And they called him in. The family called him in. So I guess the teenager must have been Jewish. And Rabbi Friedman explains how he came in. And there's the kid. Then in the morning, he had just tried to commit suicide. Now he's reading a comic book as if nothing had happened. And the kid hardly even looks up and says to him, "You're wasting your time. The hospital chaplain was already here." So Rabbi Friedman asked, "Oh, okay, very good. What did he say?" He said, "I talk nonsense. He's telling me that God loves me." Nonsense. Rabbi Friedman said, "That really is nonsense. You're nothing but a spoiled brat. Why should anybody love you?" And suddenly, this kid woke up. It's not what I need, what I want. Not about me. Something more. Am I really a spoiled brat? Is that my whole existence is being a spoiled brat? That woke him up. I want to tell you another story. If we talk about purpose, and this is something that whenever I tell it, I get it's moving. I get goosepimples. I think it's called 1971, Rosh Hashanah. I was in Washington D.C. and I was in close touch with Rabbi Harold White. He was a conservative rabbi. He was a professor at Georgetown University, and he was also in charge of the Hillel Foundation at three universities, one of which was the university called Gallaudet. Gallaudet is the National University of America for the deaf. And during the course of the year, we did several events there. The second day of Rosh Hashanah, 1971, the rabbi conducted a very abbreviated service, and he asked me to come blow the shofar. Now, first of all, blowing the shofar for the deaf sounds a little bit incongruous. And first of all, you have to understand when you go into the campus It's absolutely quiet. Nobody talks. They all. I learned a little bit of the sign language. You know the that sign language that mean words or letters, and that's the way they all communicate with each other. Um, and that year, there were about 80 Jewish students at Gallaudet University. I think about 50 came to this abbreviated service, maybe even more. And I blew the shofar. Interestingly, from the standpoint of a concert, fantastic, beautiful tkiyot, exact, no squeaks, no blurps, no beeps, everything. For the deaf, now some were able to hear a little bit. Some had been born able to hear, and as time went on, became deaf. Some were completely deaf from birth. And those who had somewhat of hearing ability to hear heard. Those who could not hear, who were totally deaf, felt the tkiyot in the spine. So just amazing. In any case, one of the students there, whose name was Michael, and he had been totally deaf from birth. In addition to that, he had another disease. I think it may have been cerebral palsy. I'm not exactly sure, but where he couldn't control his movements. He was like this. So he really had quite a bit of baggage. And he came to us for Kol Nidre. I said, Michael, how did you get here? He said, oh, no problem. I took the bus. Well, I know that he didn't take the bus. He took 3 buses. And that meant getting on 3 buses, asking the bus driver where to get off. At that time, you didn't have cards. You know, you paid, you made change. It was communicating. And I thought that was quite incredible. But at the end of the year, he was in his 4th year, his senior year. At the end of the year, when I met him, I asked him, what are you doing next year? And he said, I was just accepted to the what do you call social workers school at the University of Pennsylvania, which, as far as I know, is considered one of the best, if not the best, schools for social work in the country. And here is somebody who's deaf from birth, somebody who has, in addition to that, he can't really control his movements, and he's accepted at the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work. Why? I asked him why. Very good. Why? He said, there are people in the world who need help. That is purpose. And so, like I said, I'm not coming to give lectures. I'm not coming to give advice. I'm not directing anybody. I don't even know what my purpose is. There is a purpose, without any doubt. That's why you need a Rebbe or somebody to give you advice what your purpose is. But when I recall the story, the Michael, there are people who need help. That is purpose. The Rebbe said once that birth is God's way of saying that you are important. If you're important, it means you have purpose. And I want to finish with one more quote by Dr. Rabbi Dr. Label Wolf. He says like this: where you are is where you need to be. What you need is where you are. What you are is just what's needed. I'm going to read that again with your permission. Where you are is where you need to be. What you need is where you are. What you are is just what's needed. What's purpose? Well, we gave a nice definition why things happen. What to do with it? I'm sorry, that's not my my expertise. That's not my understanding. I don't know. Can't grasp that at all. But there is a purpose, and that's why we're here. As we come now in another 2 weeks to Rosh Hashanah, I think they are just instead of making a resolution, New Year's resolution to be a better person, let's make a resolution to dig into ourselves and think what is. I'm sorry. I'm not talking about anybody else. Myself. What is my purpose? What am I doing here? What should I do? Why am I here? And in that sense, let's ask God to give us the strength to realize our purpose, the strength to carry out our purpose, and that God should send all of Am Yisrael a good, healthy, sweet new year with abundance of brachot and besorot tovot, good tidings. Anybody, please join in. Okay, thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, much to think about. I'm glad you gave us a 2-week head start based on those comments. Also, I've been asked to read from the Torah once again.
Oh,
So,
very nice.
quite an honor, but I did it under one condition, and that was that there was no change in my reading from last year. The same 5 lines. So,
Okay, good luck.
I believe
But
the cantor is a man of his word, and he's not going to slip a new addendum into the Torah. No.
You don't have to worry. If you read the same 5 lines, it's the same 5 lines that was last year. There's no change.
Was it the same 5 lines 3,000 years ago?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You know, it's very interesting. I saw in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's I think actually it may even be in New York. And one of the museums in New York are exhibiting some of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they see exactly the same words in the prophets that we have today. In fact, I was in the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, and the week before the Shabbat before my wedding, and I found my Haftarah, and I read it from the Dead Sea Scrolls, 3,000 years old, 2,000 years old. Excuse me.
I have a Kodak Instamatic picture from 1973, Israel's 25th anniversary, I think, and it was with USY, United Scenario Youth, and we went to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Weren't they housed in a very
Yes,
truncated building? I
right.
remember it was a white building in
A
1973.
white building, and it was the roof is shaped like the handle of a Torah scroll.
Really? Is that where they still are? Or that I'm dating
Yes,
1973.
yes, yes. They're not on exhibit all the time because they're on exhibit and then they're put away in a vacuum in vacuum and dark and because the exposure to light and certainly heat and humidity is very destructive. Um,
Okay. Well, I better start preparing. It takes a lot of
okay.
effort to get me
Yes.
out of my box to read that. And, well, the chant, it's not just reading, it's getting the chant.
Mhm. Right, right. But
I could use your help.
it's a way of it's a real connection. It's a real
Yeah.
connection.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you,
Okay.
Rabbi.
Catch you
Thank you
next week.
to all. Everybody take care and keep well. Stay healthy.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.